right. Hello. I am Frank Lavinia, and this direction, to my right, is Andy Leonard, and we are testing out my audio because for the student observers, I have a headset, and this is the craziest thing. So I have a Blue Yeti mic that just worked since um, when did we get that? When we first started talking about doing a podcast. So this would have been like 6, maybe 7 years ago,
Yeah, yeah.
and worked fine up until Monday. And I replaced the cable. I plugged it directly into the laptop,
Yeah.
and it works everywhere but here.
Yeah.
So when you and I were testing it yesterday, I thought everything was fine because I worked on Teams, and
Yeah.
then I went to do a live stream today, and one of the feedbacks was, "Hey, your audio sounds really bad," and I'm like, "Really?" And then I went and listened to it, and I was like, "Yep, I did a few test recordings. Yep,
Yeah.
just so it's just here. So I don't know why we even tried another browser. So if
Yeah.
anyone out there in the within the sound of our voices has any connections with Blue Yeti or Restream, I would definitely like to know. Uh, I'm probably going to try uninstalling the driver and then reinstalling the driver.
Yeah, that's probably a fair shot. I mean,
Right.
you just got back from some travel,
Hmm.
so I don't know if you took your mic with you or not.
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. But you
I
definitely,
I first thought it was physical damage.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
and I asked my wife, like, because I know that they were in my home office is in the basement,
right.
in like the great room in the basement, and I was like, "Did you move anything?" To ask my youngest, like, "Did you play with anything?" And he's like, "No." So,
That's
but
a safe
again,
answer, though. You think about it, Frank. I mean,
that's right. Well, the other thing is, even if it was broken, I got 7 years out of it. I can't
yeah,
but be
yeah,
too upset. And I do always have a backup, so I'm glad I have this. So there is that.
yeah.
Um, yeah, but I was on a conference call Monday morning, and they're like, "Oh, we can't hear you," and I'm like, "What?"
Oh, wow.
And they're like, "Yeah, you sound really tinny." I was like, "That's weird." So then I switched to kind of the built-in microphone. You know, it's bad when the built-in mic sounds better than the fancy mic.
That's
But
funny.
but so now that we have the audio working, so I just finished a workshop at delivery,
Cool.
and I think this is the first workshop I delivered virtually,
Nice.
which is hard.
Yeah, it
And
is.
oddly enough, my microphone worked there too. So who knows what that's about? But
Hmm.
and that was also a browser-based thing. It was Blue Jeans.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going on. But
Strange.
so how you been?
I am getting better. I'm sounding better. I actually feel, with the exception of having to clear my throat every 5 seconds, um, I feel pretty good. I feel pretty normal. I am doing okay. Busy. Work just keeps flowing in, and you know this, Frank, right? You did consulting a
Hmm.
bunch, and between like Thanksgiving and Christmas is just one of the dead, kind of the dead zones. The other couple of months of dead zone is like June and July, and I'm just stacking work up on. It's getting to that point where I'm like saying, okay, I can do this, but you got to wait a little bit. So great, I'm doing well. How are you? How are you feeling? You took a couple of flights here.
I
You
did. I
did you
did.
catch the nerd flu?
I did have something, and
Mm.
apparently there was a bit of a COVID outbreak with some folks, but I've tested negative.
Oh, wow.
Aside from like having like the sniffles and stuff like that,
Yeah, yeah,
and a sore throat while I was out there,
yeah.
I'm fine. Like, and I'm fine now. Like, the
That's
dry
great.
air just does some wreaks havoc on my sinuses.
Well, that's a thing. I mean,
Right.
it's definitely a thing, and we're just, we're in the Mid Atlantic. We've got humidity all the time,
Pretty much. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
and it's moisturizing, which is one benefit of that. Except the only time I really whine about it is late August and early September
Oh,
when
then it's just nasty.
Yeah.
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 It's ridiculous. But the only way to cope with it, I found, is just drink ridiculous amounts of water
Right.
when you're out.
Well,
And
it's something you and I have both been doing anyway. I mean, you
right,
see my hydration thing. I find people say, "Why you finally broke down and got one of these, gallon jugs?" And it's like, well, yeah, but it saves me, a dozen trips up and down the steps, which may actually have been healthier for me now that I say it.
speaking of steps, I've recorded like 22,000 steps one day in Vegas.
Oh man, that's
Yeah.
nice.
Which if you look at the total for last week, it was like 125,000 or something
My
ridiculous like that.
goodness,
Like,
Frank,
yeah,
that's like a month for me.
yeah. Yeah, so the nerd flu mostly, and
Good.
I'm feeling better. It's just it's good to be home, you
Yeah,
know. My microphone problems notwithstanding, it's good to have my own permanent gear here.
that's
But this
right.
trip, I did try out the gimbal,
Yeah,
where there was a couple of segments that I did where I was
cool.
recording with the handheld gimbal, and that was pretty cool. I think it worked out pretty well. If you look at the video quality, I mean,
I saw it.
the biggest problem with those videos is you're there with 50, 60,000 of your closest friends, who also have cell phones, who are also on the Wi-Fi or the cellular network. Like,
Yeah,
and you could tell there was a point where the day before, again, my only critique of reInvent is it's not clear when it starts and then when it stops.
yeah,
Because Monday there were sessions, right? The keynote started Tuesday, so Monday night the cellular, whatever emergency, whatever the backup cell towers they put online was not there, and then Tuesday it was fine, and then
oh,
Friday they took them off.
oh
So it
wow,
was pretty interesting. Although the rodeo was supposedly still was is twice the size of reInvent, so
my goodness.
that might have had something to do with it too. It's just hard to imagine. A former guest on the show and a mutual acquaintance, Buck Woody, he posted apparently his favorite thing to do is go and get breakfast early at Denny's on the Strip.
Yeah,
And I bet for people watching, that's probably doesn't get much better than that.
that's well. There you go. And
Right.
Buck's out there this week. I think there's some other shindig data
Azure Data
conference,
Conference,
Azure
something
Data
like that. Yeah.
Conference. Yeah, and Buck's out there for that. Um,
So I
it's kind of
asked him on
interesting.
Twitter. Sorry, I cut you off. I asked him on Twitter, like, is the rodeo still going on? And in typical Buck fashion, he just didn't write back, "Oh yeah" or "Yes." It was like you wouldn't believe. Something like, must be a good story there. And that's the thing with Buck. You can always count on a good story.
That is so true.
So, um, I was poking around Humble Bundle. We haven't talked about Humble Bundle in a while.
No, I haven't looked recently.
There's some cool stuff on there.
Yeah,
So Humble Bundle, we don't get any sponsorship money from them. We don't get anything from them. I just like what they do.
I do
Uh,
too.
on multiple levels.
Hmm.
So let me load up Humble Bundle and share my screen. Let's see. Go here. All right. So hopefully you can see my screen.
I see your screen.
So most of what Humble Bundle is known for is kind of gaming.
Hmm.
But if you look here and you click on books, they have some really, really good collections for geeks this week. There's Hacking by No
Hmm.
Star Press. Um, these look really good.
I'll
I
check
have
that
some of these
out.
books already.
Yeah.
Um, there is another security one, cybersecurity expert package, which I don't think I have any of these books.
Interesting.
Well, I have this one, Applied Cryptography. That's a classic.
Yeah. Right. Right.
I think I have the original, like somewhere. Um, I might have some of these books. Um, and what's the other one that they have? There was another one, Functional Programming.
Okay.
Just spin up a new tab. And then there's another one here. Where'd it go? The Witcher, if you're into The Witcher. They have a few other ones too, comics and things like that. But this functional programming one looks really interesting.
It does.
Because I feel functional programming never had its day.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to get a bunch of like hate mail now, but like
well,
it just
yeah. But I agree with you. I don't think I don't think it got as much recognition as it needed.
yeah,
It still needs.
Yeah, it's a paradigm that I think we have yet to see the best from it. How about that as a positive take? You've yet to see the best of it because I mean it's still useful. It's still you know, I just think that is the juice worth the squeeze? That's the question I would ask.
Yeah.
Because it is a different paradigm, and I don't think it's really found a good use case just yet. If that makes sense.
I'm with you. I think they're out there, and I've heard a few presentations. I've kind of sat through a few presentations, trying to remember the names of everybody. Amanda, and I can't remember her last name. I think that was the first presentation I went to, and that was at one of the Richmond Code Camps.
Oh, and yeah, I know who you mean.
Yeah, and Kevin Fiesel.
Yeah, and then there was another Rachel. I want to say Calabrese is her last name. I forget what she got married, so I don't know what her new name. I think her new name is Calabrese, but she was big in functional programming, as was Kevin Hazard, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, Kevin did some presentations on F#, I believe.
Yeah. And Matt Podwasaki, who was a Microsoft guy.
Yeah.
He had done some stuff with F#. But it's interesting because there are some. It's almost like as a paradigm, it's been absorbed into other languages.
Yeah.
JavaScript has some very functional like things. C# has very functional. I mean, Link is a great example.
Yeah.
Every time I program in .NET, like I just love how that works. Like the Link, things like that. Like,
yeah.
Speaking of .NET, I actually have Dingo installed on another computer, so I can belt out a lot of blog posts with Dingo.
There you go.
So those of you wondering who is Dingo, Dingo is a content management, more like a content ops tool.
Yeah, it's a good name for it.
That I built for blogging that originally came about. Well, the origins of Dingo are storied. It originally started when I was doing DC Tech Minute.
Mm-hmm.
So the first iteration, it wasn't called Dingo then. I think I just called it Content Tools, which was a really inspired name. Where I would basically use OneNote and to like take notes of what I was going to talk about, and include the tweets and the Twitter IDs for it, and you'd basically go and scrape all that information and put it into a post, and I could just copy paste it over. Future versions was I would take a YouTube video URL and it would extract all the text and stuff that I wanted to put in. The Dingo came about when I had some time off, and I'm like, how can I make this better? Like, what would be the next step to this? Well, the next step would be that would actually just write the post as opposed to copy pastes. And Dingo uses the WordPress API to go out, pull the information in. So
that's so cool, Frank.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go and take a look at another Humble Bundle.
Ooh,
so this looks interesting. Talks about how to use audio, game audio. This looks pretty interesting in terms of music and how that works. Yeah. That got me thinking video game, like music and video games and stuff.
Yeah.
And then if you go to software, you can see that there's a whole bunch of software here, photo editing stuff, the essential for content creators. So a lot of folks will say like, hey, what tools do you use? I use all the Adobe suite. I think you do too. But
Yeah,
that could be a little rich for some people's blood.
yeah, yeah.
So for was it $25? You get all of the software. That's the Vegas
Hmm,
Pro, video editing software, audio
that's
editing,
nice.
a whole bunch of stuff, movie studio, audio studio.
Yeah,
A lot of good stuff in that bundle. And if I go, this is something I'm toying with. The no code um, game dev bundle.
yeah.
This looks pretty cool. You can start making games with like no code.
That's cheating.
Yeah, no code's all the new hotness.
It is.
Game art and Blender, like so. This is like how to create use like Blender to make like 3D assets and stuff.
Nice.
And this is also ties into kind of that whole metaverse type stuff. You could create like 3D environments and stuff like that.
That's
Although
too
I do
cool.
wonder what the future of the metaverse holds um, in light of Facebook's recent financial issues.
Yeah, it's you've crossed some Rubicon when a respected, well, a well-known, let's say, financial advisor goes on the network live and apologizes for giving bad advice about your stock.
There
I
is
think
something
that's
now
happened
called
once so
the
far.
there is
Yeah,
the something called the reverse Kramer index.
is that what it is?
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Um, but predicting the future is hard, So
It is. My crystal ball is
um,
broken.
um, my predictive model needs more training. But what's interesting is I think that the metaverse is more than just Microsoft. I mean Meta or Facebook.
Facebook.
Sorry,
Yeah,
it's more than any one company. That's the point, and I think that's the point that maybe Facebook lost sight of is that
yeah,
yes they and this happens a lot in the VRML world, right? Or like every
yeah,
maybe like say every 10 years, right? There's a huge buzz around it and then it dies, right? So you saw the original kind of push in the 90s
yeah.
with VRML. Well, there was obviously the big things that you would see at the mall, right? You would go
Right,
around and
right.
play. And then a few years later, VRML came out, which is the virtual reality modeling language. And then that really kind of hit a crescendo kind of in the, let's say 97 ish. And then you had Adobe Atmosphere, which was another one, which was kind of 2003 ish. And then
Yeah,
about 2010 or so, give or take a year, Oculus Rift came out, and that was really revolutionary.
yeah,
And here we are. Now we're talking about Meta and Facebook and all this stuff in VR, and it's just
yeah,
and somewhere in there, Second Life was a thing.
yeah,
Um, it just seems like on a pessimistic side, it's a solution looking for a problem.
yeah. And
Um,
I think part of the friction
mhm,
is we've gone through what 4 or 5 generations now where people have gotten accustomed to consuming visual media through 2D.
yes,
And I think that's easy to overlook. It may be because there's nothing to it and I'm just making it up, but when you compare the amount of work it takes to, especially today, you can pull out your phone and
right,
begin shooting in 2D. Whereas it's not that easy to do anything 3D at all. So
right.
yeah, I don't know.
That's an interesting thing. I mean, but I would say I would counter that with the metaverse exists and there are popular platforms. We just don't call it the metaverse, right? And this
Right.
this takes me back to a talk I was at. Wow, back in '97, and they used to have build.com. I'm not going to the browser site now. God only knows what's on that URL now. But once upon a time, in the 90s, the CNET had a developer focused channel called build.com, and they would have builder conference, the builder conference. And the first one was in New Orleans, and the second one was in San Francisco, and they would alternate between the two. And at the San Francisco one, there was this lady who she was like real. I forget her name, but she was really into like the 3D worlds and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
she was all basically really into VRML, right? So this would place it about that time. Um, and a lot of people were very skeptical, even in at the time, were very skeptical of it. And one of the things somebody came up and said in this open Q&A was, we already have a 3D world. We just don't call it VR. And at the time, it was Doom. I don't think Quake had been out yet.
Interesting.
And if you think of a multi-user three-dimensional space where people can congregate, it's Doom.
Yeah.
Right. And I find that a fascinating kind of thought experiment. Like, we have it now, right? When my kid, Minecraft, right? So
Right.
it's easy to pick out the failures in this space and label it with VRML or metaverse. It's almost like the label itself, not the technology, is the kiss of death, right?
Right.
Like, but if you look at Minecraft, right? Minecraft is a 3D kind of space. People can cooperate and visit places. If you look at obviously all the games, Fortnite, Farmville, and but all of those spaces, they are real kind of to their users. Roblox is, I think, probably the best example of kind of this collaborative 3D world space where
Right.
it's not just like one 3D world, kind of like Minecraft, or one type of 3D world like Minecraft, but it's like it's a platform, right?
Yeah.
And one of the critiques of, and there's the really interesting video on YouTube where basically it's critiquing kind of Facebook's version of the metaverse. And there are a couple of good points with it. One was the graphics are very old looking, right? They're very like 2000s era graphics, right?
Sure.
If you look at games or even Adobe Atmosphere, and I talked about Adobe Atmosphere a lot, and one of these days I got to find like videos that I don't think I took videos of it, but I would build a lot of stuff in that. They were, I mean, they were ahead of their time in terms of what
Yeah.
was possible. You could customize your avatar. You could do walking animations. There was, it's just interesting because the need for a 3D communal space where you can kind of do stuff together and explore. I mean, it is there, and it is being met by things like Minecraft, Roblox, Fortnite,
Right.
that sort of thing, and
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
number of games that you can play cooperatively. But it's almost like the whole idea of it being a place where you would go and consume content, that hasn't really panned out that well. Now, I will say that one of my experiments with one of the times I was playing around with it, I think it was called Horizon Worlds
Yeah.
or Horizon Events, which was the Facebook thing. I was able to go in and catch a Foo Fighters concert, catch a Foo, and then watch an MMA match.
Nice.
Like, and it was set up in a way that it was 3D cameras, but like you can like you could sit in a high seat, or you could sit front row. I sat front row. Um, but again, like, I don't know, did that really add to the experience?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure, because I could just go to YouTube and put on either Google Cardboard, right, or go to YouTube inside the Oculus Quest and watch the same 3D video. Like,
Right.
what's the value add on what's the value add for Facebook? And I think it says to what you said, like, we're used to consuming 2D content.
Well, and I think too your one of your earlier points was it's about, I think when we were talking about functional programming, I think it applies here too. It's a platform waiting for kind of an app or some use case, and
Right.
we've talked about, there's some interesting work, and I don't know if I want to call it work or not. It's probably people just playing around. And when I classify that, that's how I get a lot of my stuff done. Is I'll start playing around with something. But the new Unity engine, I've seen a lot about that, and then I've seen some cross pollination with, or pollination, I guess, with data visualization.
Yes.
And I remember years ago kind of walking through this with some other data people and thinking, what is there value in being able to walk around inside of a 3D bar chart and or fly over or through it, something like that. And I don't know the answer to that. I was trying to think of a killer app for it, and I don't know. I think 2D does such a good job, and I think our brains are kind of adapted to it, perhaps in an epigenetic way, after 4 or 5 generations where we've been watching television or screens for that long. I'm not sure. I'm honest, just guessing here, throwing things against the wall, but
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't know.
curious. Yeah, I'm curious if that's the case too. But I do wonder, like, part of it is the equipment, right? It is an additional investment in equipment.
Yeah,
To their credit, the Oculus Rift is probably the cheapest thing out there. Um, you could get like the Google Cardboard
right.
and just drop a smartphone in, but that's not really ended up being as popular as I thought. Um, I just don't think it's found its killer app yet.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
but that having been said, you know, the idea of these 3D spaces where you can kind of walk around, that is popular on a 2D screen, like you said. Like
Yeah,
it might just be the form factor of what we call the metaverse isn't what we expect it to be. Like it's not going to be, something out of a William Gibson novel,
yeah.
I forget who wrote Player One, Ready Player One.
I don't remember the guy's name either,
Uh,
and that's sad. But Snow Crash, who was
Snow
that?
Crash,
That was
Neil Stevenson.
Stevenson. Yeah,
He
those
has
those
an
types of
interesting
worlds.
he has an interesting book called In the Beginning Was the Command Line,
Interest. All right,
which
now I got to go read.
it's an interesting thing. It's a series of essays, and it kind of dovetails into what I talked about at reInvent, which is about the Boston University professor who, interesting guy. We should totally have him on the show. And
Okay.
one of the things that he points out is that technology dominates our lives, but most people, even computer science students who come in as freshmen, don't understand the underlying hardware, the bits and the bytes, the literal like logic gates that are going on. And
Yeah.
he has a course where he basically kind of uses the browser and Red Hat OpenShift data science to um I had to get the plug in there. Come on.
Well, sure.
But he uses that and he uses basically a tool meant for data science to really kind of strip away everything, and you have a terminal window inside of a browser, which is kind of going back to the future or using future to go back. And it's an interesting use case because
Yeah.
one of the big barriers to employing technology in education, and I'm sure anyone in the education field can attest to this, is the universities are the ultimate bring your own device environment, right?
Right.
And infrastructure will get in the way, right? So if you wanted to teach this, to scale up to, let's just say 500 students per semester or more, that's a heavy lift, right? And that's why they chose Rhodes, because OpenShift handles a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So does AWS. So it really becomes this, it becomes this point and click type operation. And I don't, I there was a rabbit hole we went down, but I think it was a
That's okay.
worthwhile rabbit
Good
hole.
stuff.
No, but I mean the idea that so one of his things is like, he talks about um, how because we're so abstracted away from the actual bits and bytes through GUIs and voice UIs and all the stuff that we have, that it's really a challenge to teach folks to go back to the source. And it's a fascinating discussion on how that is. And when he was talking about that, I was thinking how that reminded me of this book. So in preparation for the talk, I reread the book, and I was like, yeah, this is exactly what he's saying. Neil
Right.
Stephenson kind of predicted it. It's funny because he's talking about Windows 95 and Windows 98 being these new things, right? Because it was written in 99, but it was just as true then as it is now, arguably
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
so, right? And I've seen this with my own kids, and I'm sure you have too. Is that
Mhm.
my oldest assumed everything was a touch screen, right? So he would walk up to TVs and like try to touch them, like to play the video or whatever, and then he would turn and say when he was a toddler, like broken, broken, right? My younger kid, and they're only 5 years apart,
Yeah.
he expects there to be an Alexa device everywhere,
Interesting.
which is fat. Like we'll be in a hotel room, like Alexa, what's the weather today? Like or Alexa, what's this? And you know, and that is also interesting. I'm wearing the voice. I went to the voice conference last year, which is in DC,
Cool.
and apparently it's come out, and I don't know who said it or whatever, but it's basically they're calling Alexa a failure. I don't know if you saw this.
No.
So there was some report, and I don't know the details. I got to read the details before I talk
I'm
about
trying
stuff
to
like
fix
this.
my camera's focus. Go ahead.
Oh, you look wonderful, Andy, especially with your new high speed internet. Um,
Even when I'm fuzzy.
there's a lot of I think where we're at that point, we're in the precipice of a recession, right? And people are looking more pessimistically than warranted at
Yeah.
how tech companies who have had a pretty good run, right? I mean, the last time
Hmm.
there was a major tech crash was what 2001, 2002.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you know, and there was also some pain around the financial crisis, but it really
Sure.
left most technology companies largely
Right.
unscathed.
Right.
I'd say. So there's this whole thing about how, and I even saw an article about um, how the quote unquote, the challenges. Let me look it up while I talk because it was
Okay.
interesting.
I'm going to restart my camera.
And
See if that fixes it. It didn't fix it. What is going on? I am out of it. Maybe I need to move further back. Maybe it's trying to tell me to get it. Now, oh, actually, that did help. Now I'm more in focus. That's weird.
there you go. Here we go. And this, keep in mind, this is on Windows Central, so I suspect there's a bit of Schadenfreude here. Um, so
Oh, yeah. I saw that headline, and that was when I stopped reading.
this seems a bit strong, right?
Mm, yeah.
And there are some interesting points in here, right? Like obviously Facebook has had its troubles, but to
Hmm.
compare Alexa to that, I think is a stretch.
Yeah.
Um, and I
I, I kind of wonder if we'll ever know the real reason Microsoft killed Cortana. I have no idea what it is. I'm not.
oh, I've heard some stories.
I can
I don't
imagine.
know. I don't know if I can share them yet, but if you're clever and you
You
follow
can
me
tell
on
me later.
LinkedIn and you see who
You
else has been on these streams,
gotcha.
um, you could probably figure out who my source is. But I won't reveal names.
Yeah,
But
it doesn't. Nothing I've read publicly flies.
yeah, I mean, that's another thing. Cortana should have been a slam dunk, right? It
Yeah.
really should have been a slam dunk because if it's built into Windows, right, that is X number of places it'll work.
Right.
But for reasons that real or imagined, it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
And I think part of it might have been the developer story.
Hmm.
Um, I think part of it might be, I'll call it the Silverlight effect, right?
Right.
The fact that folks are a little hesitant to get involved in a platform that, who knows, it could be killed by one person in a corner office in a suburb of Seattle,
Right.
right? Um, ask me how I know.
Hmm, hmm,
Um,
hmm, hmm.
but we saw it with Silverlight, we saw it with the Windows 8 ecosystem and kind of around Windows 8. And I suspect that there were people that were kind of like, well, I'm going to wait and see. And then that's never a good sign for the health of a platform, is a wait and see approach, right?
Yeah.
Um, I myself, in the years that I was busy retooling for data science, right? I was like, oh, I should come up with a Cortana skill. I should do that. I should also come up with a an application for the Microsoft Band, right? And I have a list. I have my whiteboard hung back up again. I have a list of things I want to do and technology I want to explore. Right? AI
Yeah.
does tend to take most of the and data engineering tends to take most of the oxygen out of the room.
Right.
And by the time I would have gotten around to writing a band or a Cortana skill, they're gone.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, that pat myself on the back and like, well, I prioritize correctly. Right.
Right. Right. You went with
um,
stuff that's still around.
um, well, you just you got to go with what works and stick with what
Yeah.
works and always try. But I think calling. So this is ultimately a thing that kind of came up a couple of times, right? So we had a number of customers that would come out to us and like, hey, we want a voice powered solution for our office, and you know they wanted to use Alexa, but Alexa is essentially a loss leader for Amazon,
Okay.
right? To buy stuff in Amazon. So you can do things in Alexa, you can do all these things. I could turn the lights on, I could turn the lights off, but ultimately it is to make it as easy as order more coffee pods, for me, right? That's
Hmm.
really what it's geared. It's geared for that, giving the weather and things like that.
Sure.
Um, and for an enterprises, I still think there's an opportunity to create. One example would be like a hotel room, right? Like, you
Hmm.
have a hotel room that would have some kind of voice assistant in there that you could say, "Hey, I'd like to check out now. Hey, I would like to do this. Hey, I like to order dinner." Right? That sort of thing. Doing that with Alexa, the way that I had to be careful because there were these are real customer stories from a few years back.
Right.
Doing that with Alexa is basically impossible, right?
Wow.
Now, and I basically pitched this idea that, hey, what if we did something around Cortana, around our speech APIs, even if it doesn't involve Cortana, because Cortana was already kind of rumored on the way out,
Mm.
but it was shot down, right? Because I want to do this whole kind of proof of concept thing. Now it worked out well because the pandemic hit and hotels really didn't have money to spend in that, right? But um, that technology is still, I think there's still a need for it. But the
Mm.
question there is, how do you monetize that? Now, for a hotel, I think you could probably measure that, right? How many more meals were ordered? How many minutes were saved from calling the front desk, right? And I think
Right.
I thought about that when my recent stay in Vegas. It was like I had to call the front desk, and I was like, oh my god, I gotta wait on hold. I just have a simple question that a simple chatbot or a voice assistant could have helped with. That having been
Right.
said, um, you know, I saw, and this is kind of vindication. I saw a runway because there's no way that they would have to re-engineer the way Alexa is done at the back end, right, to make this work, like just for
Gotcha.
hotels, like a hotel solution. But funny thing enough, like maybe 8 months after I made that kind of pitch,
Yeah.
Amazon announced that they were doing like I think it was called Alexa for hospitality, right? Where it was basically like an IoT story and kind of it would have because when you go into a hotel room, right? When you have these devices in your home, they know who you are. They you sign up to your account, all that stuff. When you log into a hotel room, how do you provision that device? So now I'm Frank checked in that room, in room
Right.
123, and Andy's in room 125. How do you provision that? And there's a
Yeah.
lot of infrastructure that when you start pulling at that thread, you don't realize how much infrastructure there is.
Yeah.
Long and short of it is that for them to call this a failure, I think is hyperbole, and I think it's clickbait. Um, and I also do realize that now that we're in the precipice of a recession, which is usually when things look the most dismal. Uh, that there's a lot of shareholders kind of asking the questions of this. Um,
Yeah,
I,
that's fair.
this says the failure. One, I have an issue with this here. Calling this a failure, which I think is
Yeah,
hyperbole, clickbait. I'm trying to get it
yeah,
so it shows the whole thing. Um, that is clickbait, and I disagree with this statement. Cortana was
yeah.
a missed opportunity from day one. It, I mean, you had it on the Xbox, you had it on every Windows device, but I don't think the execution was well done. Um,
Hmm.
Cortana, just most gamers knew who Cortana was right away. Right,
Yeah,
it made sense. Character from Halo. Um, to make to embed it in the product was a logical fit. Like it was perfect. Like you can just tap it. Every computer at this point has some kind of microphone. Um, it just
sure.
seemed like the infrastructure was in place. The question is, how would that be monetized, right? And that's kind of the gist of this, right? Because the thinking was that you know they basically sold they base Amazon basically sells Amazon Echo devices at
Right.
cost, which is brilliant because now it's part of a vast ecosystem. But it's what's also interesting to point out here, and you can tell the coffee's kicking in, um, that the Google Home Assistant apparently they shut down their developer program.
Hmm.
So you used to be able to basically create your own chatbots to connect through that, but apparently they shut that down. Now, I don't know the details about it, but it just seems to me kind of odd. So I
Yeah, it is.
wonder. I don't. I just can't imagine not having a voice assistant around now, right? It's just part and parcel of the smart home, right? Or not even that,
Right,
but just like
right.
I think the challenge is going to be how does that get monetized? But
Yeah,
being in people's homes and being deployed already is the last mile problem that Alexa has solved, right? I think getting that last mile solving that problem is the thing that Cortana struggled with Google Home or Google Assistant struggled with.
mm,
I think if you can monetize it, even like a fraction of a cent, you'll make the money back. Like I just think it's a long play. So calling it a failure, I think, is at best clickbait and misleading at worst.
yeah.
You know, maybe I should report them for misinformation.
I had that thought. I was forming a sentence, but the key word was misinformation.
Misinformation, and
Hadn't
PayPal will
quite
take money
got
from
there
you.
yet. Yeah,
But I just don't believe that calling it a failure. I think is too strong of a word.
I agree.
You know, but I might be biased because I'm a believer in voice technology. I think Cortana I think Cortana suffered the same fate as Windows Phone, right? Like
Yeah,
they botched the launch. Same fate as Windows 8, right? The launch was botched, right? And
yeah,
then particularly when you're dealing with consumer devices, it's kind of like, okay, well, why do I need this? Like, why do I need that, right? And that's a
sure.
hard market to crack. Like 3D TVs never really made it, right? Like a few other gimmicks never really made it, right? What people want is they want the bigger, they want the 70-inch screens.
Sure.
Doesn't have to be 3D. I think I don't know. I'm still bullish on voice technology.
Yeah, I am too. Um, and I have been since I forget what they called those back 12 years ago or something. Agents? Was it
Agents,
agents?
yeah, bots or
Yeah,
agents, yeah.
yeah. And I think maybe natural language processing is going to crack that. Crack that open. I don't know.
I think it has to be a well-designed bot
Yeah,
because you can have just because you can process natural language doesn't make it a usable product,
yeah,
which I think is a very natural failing for engineers to have. Is to
yeah.
assume that once you solve the problem, everything else is fixed. No, I mean, if you want to one area where this is just god awful, a god awful use of this technology is, and I've had to call airlines and stuff in the last week or two, right? Like the voice recognition on calls, right? Because what inevitably happens as soon as I'm on a phone, someone will talk to me, and the bot and the agent on the thing says, "Would you like to, find out itineraries, learn more about this, or do that?" And then someone talks to me, and it's not smart enough yet to know I'm not talking to the phone. I'm talking to whoever's around me. It
Right.
doesn't catch that, right? So it says, "I'm
Right.
sorry,
Right.
I don't understand what that is," and it reads the whole thing over again. It's like, oh my god, like, and that could be easily solved with a simple loop, like, "Hey, were you talking to me just now? If
That's a
yes,
good,
then it
good
takes
point.
it, and if no, then it would ask it again, right? Like, it's just very annoying to have that happen.
Yeah.
Um, where it does tend to work out um, is in areas where, like in the home, where you can talk to it, set a timer, do this, do that. Like that whole hands-free experience in the car is also great too.
Yeah.
Uh, when you can reply to text messages and stuff. Although sometimes the errors that come out of that are quite comical.
Hmm.
I remember um, I remember once I forget what it interpreted, but I think it said something about like, oh, the monkeys have surgery in the morning, which is I think was what it came out with, or something like that. And it was just completely like out of place. Like,
That's so funny. You know
uh,
why it messes up on you, Frank? It's because you have an accent.
I have an accent, yes, and you don't. I know.
I don't. Yeah.
That's funny. Well, we've been going for 47 minutes, so I figured
Goodness.
I got a meeting I got to jump to. But good
Okay.
talking to you.
Same.
I'm going to listen to this audio feed, make sure that it still sounds good, just in case that there's some other weird encoding thing going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
But thanks for
Well, I
having me.
can hear you
Yep.
just fine. So hopefully that's a good sign.
Well, that's a good sign. Somebody can at least hear me. All right. And with that, I will close out the stream. Let me know if you watch this, if the audio is fine, and put in hashtag replay or hashtag live. And thanks for tuning in. I'll close the outro graphics now.